I did help lead the secret talks with the Iranians over the nuclear issue through most of 2013, which helped produce the comprehensive nuclear agreement that was reached about a year and a half later. That agreement, both the interim agreement we reached at the end of 2013 and then the comprehensive one, neither of those were perfect. In my experience in the Middle East over the last 40 years, perfect is rarely on the menu. But what it did do, in my view anyway, was significantly constrain Iran's ability to break out from a very limited civilian nuclear program to a weapons program. It imposed a series of quite intrusive verification monitoring measures that would enable us and others in the international community to see if the Iranians were trying to cheat and to weaponize as well. I think, and I said this at the time, I was out of government by this point, that it was a mistake for the first Trump administration to pull out of that agreement at a time when, for all the other threats that this Iranian regime creates. And it's not just about the potential for a nuclear weapon, it's also about the support for a variety of terrorist groups across the Middle East, the active plotting to assassinate American former leaders as well as, current leaders as well. So, this Iranian regime poses huge threats and huge dangers to the United States. However, I think on the nuclear program, it's a good thing that the current administration seems to be re-engaging in negotiations. They will be very tough. In my own experience, which is where most of my white hair came from, negotiating with Iranians, it is not an easy task. There's some very fundamental questions that have to be addressed at some point in the negotiations, like, does the Iranian regime come out of this, as they did in the comprehensive nuclear agreement, with a very limited domestic enrichment program to enrich uranium for civilian purposes, or do you try to eliminate that entirely? Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel has talked about the Libya model, where, more than 20 years ago, I was involved in those negotiations too. We persuaded, with a great deal of pressure, Muammar Gaddafi to get out of the business of terrorism and to give up what was a rudimentary nuclear program, basically lock, stock, and barrel. I don't personally think that this Iranian regime is going to agree to zero domestic enrichment. And again, in the comprehensive agreement, that was limited to under 5%, which is what you need for a civilian program, not for a weapons program. But that's going to be one of the big challenges. But I think, to hold out for the Libya model is virtually to ensure that you're not going to be able to negotiate an agreement. There's lots of other things that you can do to tighten the screws on this Iranian regime. I can't imagine that you would want to talk about some of those regional issues, that you wouldn't want to insist that this Iranian regime can't continue to plot against American political figures and leaders. So this may be a more expansive effort at negotiations.
آنچه در مورد ما میگویند